with us. And so let's just jump right in and see how the rabbi's doing today. Shalom, Rabbi. So good to be with you, sir. We look forward to hearing today. We got Mishnah 12, chapter 2, Mishnah 12.
100%. That's where we're holding. Hopefully, I should be coming in clear now. Just change the microphone setting. But yeah, so we are holding definitely by Mishnah 12. We're probably happy because we'll probably do it in one shot. That might actually hit a little bit of part of 13, but Mishnah 13. But then we're going to spend a while on that. There's quite a bit to speak about there. So here the Mishnah tells me. Remember, we talked about the students of Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, right, and the different character traits, and why these people represented these good character traits. So now he used to say that Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, if all the sages of Israel were on one part of the balance scale, let's say they were on one side of the scale, and now Eliezer ben Hirkinis was on the other. So the Mishnah says he would outweigh them all. Comes along Abba Shaul. Abba Shaul said in his name, if all the sages of Israel, with even Rebbe Eliezer ben Hirkinis, among them, were on one part of the balance scale, one part of the scale, and Rabbi Eliezer ben Arach was on the other, he would outweigh them all. Right? So we see that seemingly there's a difference of opinion. There's a difference in the opinion from the Mishnah, right? We have the first Tana who says that Rebbe Eliezer ben Hirkin is greater than everyone else, and Abba Shaul says no, that Rebbe Eliezer ben Arach, if he were on that side of the scale, 100%, he would outweigh everyone else. Now, the question is, it really looks like they're arguing. Simple explanation would be that they're arguing. That one holds Rebbe Eliezer ben Hirkinis was greater, and one holds no, Rebbe Eliezer ben Arach. So one of the commentaries explains that Abba Shaul over here is not arguing. Right? He's not arguing over here. That really both things that Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai said are true. Now the question is, how can they be true? Either one's greater or one's not greater, right? The question is, maybe we're talking about a different topic here. Maybe one is greater in certain things and the other is greater in certain things, right? So when speaking about a person's knowledge and memory, so Rabbi Eliezer would outweigh everybody else. In other words, came to a person's memory and knowledge, he was greater. But by a person's sharpness and depth of understanding, who is greater? Rabbi Eliezer ben Arach. So this is going to have to be explained. What's the greater character trait over here? Or let's say better, what's the better trait? Is the better trait knowledge and understanding? Knowledge, let's say, in memory? Or is it sharpness and depth? Right? That's going to be the question. Because memory, is something that's important. Because the person has to have the ability to be able to answer. In other words, a true rabbinic scholar, someone asks them a question, they should have an answer straight away. Right? In other words, it should be at the tip of their tongue. So memory is worth something because the person will be able to recount, be able to recall what they know. And they'll be able to use it in answering questions, right? You need knowledge, you need memory. Also, we got a second aspect here. We have sharpness and depth of understanding, right? So memory is good. Memory is very good because you have to remember what you learned, right? I don't think there's any question, right? But you have to know depth also. Memory enough, just remembering what you learned doesn't really matter it doesn't really matter if you don't know depth over here. In other words, you could repeat things verbatim, but not how to put things together. Right? You may not know how to answer, just by knowing things and memorizing things, okay, so a person can repeat information. But if you don't understand, right? If you don't understand over here, right? If you don't understand, you just memorize things, okay? Right? Having a memory is worth something. No question about it. Person has to work on their memory. At the same time, what about depth? You have to have depth also. So it says, Mori Rebbe, Arav Agon and Moshe Machlita should be well. So he asked the question, what's better? Sharpness or memory? So he brought down from one of the Torah giants more than 100 years ago, 150 years ago, Rabbi Shlomo Kluger, of blessed memory. And Rabbi Shlomo Kluger asked the following question. What's the doubt? What's the question over here? Normally, we hold like the first Tana. If there's a difference of opinion, let's say the first Tana, the first rabbi, even though we're not mentioned necessarily by name, makes a statement. What's the halacha? Normally, it's like him. Right? In other words, in this case, against Abba Show. So general rule is, we'll say, we go like him. So therefore, what would I understand according to how we would, Poskin go according to Jewish law, right? There are a number of things where we understand, there are certain general rules. Let's say better. There are certain general rules, right? Now, based on that, this is a general rule that if you have the first Tana and he argues, right, he disagrees with Abba Shol. So how do we go? Do we go like Abba Shol with the first Tana? Or we go like the first Tana? So therefore, what would I understand? Memory is a better quality here. Now, comes along the Marshak, also one of the great later commentaries. The Marshak explains what's the difference of opinion here. What are they saying? Now, it could be, says the Marshak, that it was only speaking about a certain time period where the oral law was not written down. Remember, oral law was something that was supposed to stay oral. It was supposed to stay down. It was supposed to be passed down generation to generation, orally. What was the problem? Problem was that you have the destruction of the temple. You have the exile of the Jewish people from the land of Israel. So the rabbis were afraid that they're going to be exiled and it really looks bad. They got to write it down. Because if they don't write it down, it'll be forgotten. And they were right. Because if you didn't write it down, it would be forgotten. No question about it. So it comes on the Marshak and says the difference of opinion here is depending on the time period we're talking about. Because where the oral law is not written down, and there are a few books written. Now remember, paper was very scarce, certainly way back when, right? So, you didn't have so much of it or so many things to write on. So where oral law wasn't written down and it was passed down, you had a lot of chains, right? Maybe you had 1,000 chains, trying to remember what their rabbi said, etc. So that's why it's not a big game of telephone. Because when it comes to oral law, what are people going to say? You have to watch my videos on Tanakh Talk, spoke about this. But what's the idea? The idea is that I have a lot of chains. If I didn't have a lot of chains, meaning that you had a lot of people memorizing certain things, then for sure it would have been forgotten. Because really, you're going to tell me the bigger scheme of things, it's like a big game of telephone. Right? You tell somebody one thing, they tell someone the same thing, that person tells the next person, etc. But it gets, down the line, it gets lost. Down the line, you go back 50 people, 100 people, and then you go back to the beginning. What was said wasn't originally what was said, right? They change it. Why? Because they hear what they hear. So in that sense, I would agree that if you're going to tell me that's how oral law was, then oral law would be a hodgepodge. Be an absolute hodgepodge. Why would it be a hodgepodge? Because no one would remember. Nobody would remember. So they had to write it down. They had no choice. But at the time, oral law was not written down. If it was not written down, and there are a few books written, so what's most important? Memory. You don't have what's written down. If I don't have what's written down, how in the world am I going to remember you? There's no way. There's no way, because it's just too much information. Way too much information. Right? So therefore, so then the question is, how to get passed down? How did oral law get remembered? Because there were hundreds and hundreds of chains memorizing what they needed to memorize. So, you had one chain memorizing this, another chain memorizing something else, third chain memorizing something else. They had hundreds and hundreds of these chains memorizing the same material that they were supposed to memorize. So that's not a big game of telephone. And the reason is because, again, you have hundreds of people memorizing the same thing. So that's not going to get lost. So if you're going to tell me oral law is not written down, and it has to be passed down orally, then what do I have? I need memory. If I don't have, if there's no good memories out there, then everything's going to be forgotten. Now, today, so that's talking about the time oral law is not written down. But today, right, today is a different story. Today, if a person knows how to learn, it's easy to find a book, or you got a lot of things online, right, as well, or you get these, discs, and USBs that have hundreds of thousands of rabbinic literature on them, right, early commentaries, later commentaries, modern commentaries. So very easy if you know what you're looking for, because everything, a lot of things written down, many things written down. There are things been lost over time, true, but many, many things have been written down. Many things have been written down. So therefore, if I already know things have been written down, then what am I looking for? What's more important? Sharpness of the person. See, if I have to rely on the mind, and I have to rely on the fact that I have to repeat things over and over so I remember, so it becomes like second nature, so I can answer like this. So that you have to work on your mind. You have to work on your memory. But if it's something where everything's already written down, so the mind, the memory, doesn't matter over here. I don't have to remember so much. I don't have to remember it verbatim. Why not? Because everything's written down. Right? The great rabbis, previous generations, certain things they had memorized because they only had one book. Let's say they had a Rajba. They had one Rajba, so they had to, they wanted to look at it or whatever. They had to remember what it said. Couldn't write it down. They had to remember what it said. Memorize it. There were certain cases of certain books that, part of it got lost. There were certain rabbis that filled in the rest. They had memorized from from young age. So they were able to do it. So now, what are we talking about over here? What's most important for this generation? Sharpness of mind. Sharpness of a person is a stronger trait. Right now, what does that mean? What does that mean exactly? Because we said over here there are two things where we're seeing what's better. One is memory and knowledge. The other is sharpness and depth of understanding. Now, knowledge is one thing, but that might be superficial knowledge. That may not be depth of knowledge. Right? So my Rebbe says that you can't learn things or know things on a superficial level. You need both. That's why in yeshivas you have two ways of learning, right? One way is you learn in depth, right? Let's say for the morning you learn in depth, and you go very slow. And in the afternoon, you go at a quicker pace, so you cover more ground, right? In other words, you got to see the breadth of what you're learning, right? But you need both, because the reality is, if a person only learns in depth, you're not going to cover any ground. You're not going to know anything. If a person only learns superficially or learns at a much quicker pace, then you're not going to understand anything. So you need a combination, right? You need a combination over here. So Rabbi here says you can't learn things on a superficial level, but you have to learn in depth, but you have to cover ground, right? So if a person's learning Talmud and the commentaries, in order to fully grasp what's going on, I have to learn it in depth, really in depth, and then I have to get to what the practical law is, because that's where we derive from. We derive all practical law from what the Talmud says. You get the early commentators, later commentaries, modern day commentaries, etc. But everything's codified. I have the code of Jewish law, right? That's the base of all Jewish law, of what we do. And then you have the commentators say they agree with it, they don't agree with it, different things, right? Different things. So at the end of the day over here, what do I have? So I have a lot of information. So I have to know how to decipher this information. But I have to get to what the practical law is. Now, when a person's younger and they're going in depth, so they'll learn how to learn. They're being taught how to learn, how to analyze. They also have to know what the practical law is, right? But that's for later. Why do I say it's for later? Because there they have to be able to differentiate. Let's say I have a Rashba and a Ritva, two of the great early commentaries, right? So let's say they say similar things on a certain topic. Now, if they say things on a certain topic, right? They say things on a certain topic. Let's say the language not exactly the same. Let's say there are certain nuances one says and the other doesn't. Now the question is, does that mean they say the same thing? Or does that mean that they really, that there is a nuance over here, that they disagree, right? Essentially, one is not saying exactly what the other is. Now, a person would say, come on, this is semantics. And it's not necessarily semantics over here. Why? Right? Why would I say that? I say it for one simple reason. Because if you're looking at these commentaries and you're going, into detail, Pirkei in detail over here, they may say similar things. One may add a word or two or three. That can make a difference. That can make a practical difference according to Jewish law. Yeah. Or you could say no. Essentially, one's adding a little bit here, but there's no practical difference. So that you have to sit on it. You have to see. Do they say the same thing? Don't they say the same thing? Right? But there are two things over here. One is learning what the Gemara says, what the Talmud says. Then it's going through the commentary. And then, and then being Pirkei in the details what the commentaries say. The last thing would be, as my Rebbe would say, is to know what the practical law is. That would be the practical law. Comes out. Yeah, but at the end of the day, some people go so in depth, they don't get there. So I'll just throw this out there. It doesn't really apply to Noahide, but I just want to point this out. I remember the first thing I learned when I was learning Talmud was the second chapter of Bava Metzia, which my 11-year-old learned last year. And why the first Gemara that they learn is about lost objects. Why, about, if I have an obligation to return them, I don't have an obligation to return them, right? What's the point? To know this world's not hefker. This world is not ownerless. And that if there are, if a person comes across a lost object, question, do I have to return it? Don't I have to return it? Right? There'll be a whole question over here. So for kids, they have to learn, it's not finders keepers. If it has a sign on it, I have to put up, if there's something that's significant, it can be recognizable either by location or amount or the way it's put there, then I have to return it, to put up signs, right? if someone's missing something there, etc. If it's something not that way, then I don't have to return it. Anyway, there's a lot of detail. So someone once asked me, when I was first learning, they said, okay, you have a lost object, what do you do? Practically speaking, what do you do? So I was like, well, Rashi says like this. The other one says like, the other commentary says like this. Someone else says like that. We went so in depth. I said, yeah, when I find a lost object, I'm going to kick it. I'm going to kick it over here. We didn't get to the practical law, right? We didn't get that far. Why didn't we get that far? Because we're learning how to learn. We're learning the basics. Now, even for a non-Jew, the question, and I spoke about this a while ago in my class for Noahide nations, and that is, how in depth can a non-Jew go when it comes to learning? So they can't learn exactly like a Jew. That's true. Even laws that apply to them, no question how far in depth that they're allowed to go. Not really the topic for now, right? But the point is that even for non-Jews, I get questions a lot, where a non-Jew will say, it says, Rashi says like this, or this commentary says like that. Let's say they're learning Chumash, they're learning the Torah, 5 books of Moses, whatever you want to call it, or in Tanakh, prophets of the writings, and they say, well, this is what it says, and this is what Rashi comments on. And so the question will be, what did Rashi mean? Because maybe I know something else, I have other knowledge. And if I have other knowledge, good question. That's a different level of learning. First, we're just trying to learn out what the Torah wants from me. Practically speaking, what do I do, what I don't do? Then I have to go back and relearn, right? Certainly for a Jew, got to know what blessings to make over fruit and vegetables, and, it gets complicated. But the bottom line is, practically speaking, I have to know what to do. It comes to laws of Shabbos, laws of Kashrus. So even if I don't understand, let's say, all the axioms and how it works per se, practically speaking, I have to know what to do. So you get the practical information, you'll know what to do, and then you go back and learn why. Then you go back and learn more in depth. That's a different thing. Because, so someone will say, well, why don't you learn in depth first? And then you'll know the basics much better. Well, there's one problem. If a person doesn't know what blessings to make, learning in depth is not going to help. It'll help after the fact, right? But practically speaking, I have to know how to keep Shabbos. I have to know what to do with the hot plates. If I take something off and I want to put it back on, are there any conditions? Doesn't matter if it's wet or dry, right? Or it's a liquid, whatever the case is. So that I have to know, practically speaking. Yeah, so I can speak till today, tomorrow, the next day, of all the intricacies of the laws, lose everybody in 5 minutes about all, the Gemara says like this, commentaries say like this, there's a whole difference of opinion and why it is and blah, blah, blah. Most people are going to say, get to the practical point. Get me to what we do today, right? So my conversion classes, that's what we do. Give a little bit of background, certain things. But if I was going to go in depth from soup to nuts, from beginning to end, it would take me forever, right? And it's not practical. Down the line, when a person has these things down and they understand how it works, okay, learning why, that's another issue. That's another level. Even for Noahites. That would apply. Because you're going to say, well, what are the practical laws when it comes to idolatry? What are the practical laws when it comes to, not killing? So they have to know what to do, right? And that's the purpose of these Noahide classes, is for them to know what to do, and how to do them. But at the same time, got to give a little bit of background also, just so they understand. But you're not going to go so in depth, because the problem to go in depth, different issues with that. But even if it would be permissible, they have to know practically what they're allowed to do, not allowed to do. And if you go way too much in depth, first of all, you're going to lose a lot of people. Second of all, they're going to say, I don't have to know all this. I just need to know practically, right, what I'm allowed to do. So that's a major difference. It's a major difference in learning, between a Jew and a non-Jew. A non-Jew has an obligation to learn what they're obligated in. They're mitzvahs. They're obligated. They have to know what to do. When it comes to stealing, other things, they have to know what to do. Now, practically speaking, do they have to know in depth like a Jew would have to know? No. They don't. They have to understand why, because all these things are universal. Whatever applies to a non-Jew, when it comes to their laws, the Noahide laws, they're all universal according to the Torah. So they have to understand, right? They have to understand what they are and how, and how they apply, right? And what makes sense, etc. 100%. They have to know that. More in depth, so that's going to be more of a problem. That is definitely going to be more of a problem. But, as someone here points out, that when you start asking questions, and even, let's say, trick questions get you to think, right? You can go deeper. That's true. 100%, that's true. But there are different levels of learning. The first level of learning is understand what the words say. All right, it comes to prayer, comes to other things. Understand what it says at a base level. Know what the words mean. Then you got to think into it. Then, you try and delve into it more. To try and understand it at a deeper level. Because there are plenty of things, we can try and understand at a deeper level that have nothing to do with Kabbalah, right? I see people all the time wanting to learn Kabbalah, other things, but you got to get the basics down. You got to understand, what it says, but it can be very deep even without that. Now, it makes sense, and I would understand why someone would want to delve into that, because it's a lot more esoteric, probably a lot more interesting. It makes you feel like you're somewhere, in space or whatever it is. But at the same time, remember one thing. And that one thing a person has to remember is you can't run till you learn how to crawl. Right? And, you can't learn, if a person's learning calculus, higher mathematics, you can't do it without algebra, trigonometry. You can't. Everybody knows that. So you cannot jump levels here. But at the same time, there's a depth to Torah even without Kabbalah. So I'll give a practical example. When I was in South America before all my books had come, so right before Passover. So right before Passover, I met with a bunch of families in someone's house. I spoke in Spanish, Hebrew, English, back to Spanish, about coming out of Egypt and what Passover represented. So this went on for like a couple hours. So at the end, and a lot of these Jews, how do they get involved in Judaism? Because in Santiago, in Chile, there was a Kabbalah center. So a lot of them got introduced to Judaism through Kabbalah. I can't really say real Kabbalah because I don't believe people teaching there know real Kabbalah, but forget, doesn't matter. Right? That's how they got to Judaism. So I told them at the end of these 2 hours, and I went into depth about the coming out of Egypt. I told them, I just want you to know one thing. And that one thing is that whatever I gave over had nothing to do with Kabbalah. So I wanted to show them there's a depth in Torah, tremendous depth in Torah without Kabbalah. Now, a person's over 40, they've learned a lot of Torah, etc. They've learned a tremendous amount of Torah. Okay, they should be allowed to learn Kabbalah. Okay. But if a person can barely read the Aleph base and doesn't know that much about anything in Torah, you're not going to learn Kabbalah. Doesn't make sense to learn Kabbalah. You got to learn the basics first. You learn the basics. You learn it very well. You have a lot of fear of heaven. Your stomach is full of Torah, mitzvahs, and all that, and learning, different issue. Right? I see people all the time. Super duper, whatever you want to call them, Noahites. Quoting Kabbalah and this and that. It's a joke. It's an absolute joke. Have they been through one tractate themselves in Talmud, even though they quote Talmud this, that? No. Do they have teachers that teach them? No. This is a problem. And this is one of the more serious problems when it comes to conversion. Yeah, one second. And it comes to Noahides in general, right? And that is that people think they can learn things on their own. They don't need a teacher. That is a huge mistake. Huge mistake. And I can tell you in, life experience and what I've seen, there are people that think they know much more than they do. And there are people that don't care about rabbinic guidance. They just do what they want. And there are other people, that, like we said, they just want to do what they want, but they don't have the knowledge. They think they have the knowledge. They quote things, this and that. And when a person listens to them, as I've seen many times, someone told me, yeah, I listened to this person. I came out more confused than when I went in. Yeah, that makes perfect sense. You know why? Because the person who teaches and loses people when they teach, there's no point. In other words, if you're going to give over information they understand. And they can understand. Who wants to give a class and no one understands? I mean, some people do that. They speak way above people. They don't bring it down to this world, and they're lost. So the person came to me. I told them, I said, okay, see what happens. Go to this class and tell me what happens. I knew exactly what was going to happen. Comes back to me and says, Rabbi, I don't even know why I went. I came out more confused than when I went in. You know what they say? You get what you don't pay for. That's a problem. Because someone, in order to give over information, you have to know the information backwards and forwards in order to give it over to others to understand. If you yourself don't understand it, you can't give it over. You can't pass it down. So you had a question.
Yeah, on the flip side of the coin, because we just had an issue in the chat room with another potential convert who was slamming Noahides as nonsense, and I run into this all the time, Rabbi. I find those that seem to think conversion is for them often they seem to be the most profane people when it comes to hanging out with Noahides, as if we don't want enough or something. In reality, the way I look at it is that there are limits to what is exactly our portion. And realistically, can you just give a clarification on exactly, can you explain who the Noahides are for this person in the chat room? The point being, from my understanding, it is as Jew-ish as a non-Jew can be, shy of conversion, but conversion is not for everyone. I mean, it's not up. The Jewish nation doesn't intend to convert the entire world, and the message to the world, from my understanding, is the Sheva Mitzvot.
Mm-hmm. Right. So I don't understand. So what's the question?
We've got one of your convert students in there claiming Noahides are nonsense.
Oh, that's obviously not true. I mean, Noahides have an obligation to learn Torah, right? What's the obvious proof? That Noah, brings all these animals in, right? And he's going to bring a sacrifice. So he's going to bring a sacrifice. So Rashi asks, how did he know? How did Noah know how to bring a sacrifice? Well, must be learn Torah. That's what Rashi says. So now, if that's true, Noah has to learn Torah. He's got an obligation to learn Torah. What does he have to learn? What applies to them? There are 7 Noahide laws. That's an umbrella of more than 60 laws. But the point is that Pirkei Avos is for everybody. Now, no Jew should be watching this because it's Shabbos in most parts of the world. Right? If Jews who want to participate, they're allowed to. Right? This is ethics. A Jew in training, this applies to. Right? These are ethics. Ethics apply to non-Jews. Now, ethics apply to non-Jews, I would say, maybe a lot of these things are, moral imperative, right? So let's say it's a moral imperative. If it's a moral imperative, it doesn't mean they're obligated. It means it's a good thing for them to do. Right? It's imperative. Now, that being said, when it comes to books of ethics, Musar, Path of the Just, good book to read during the month of El, even for non-Jews. What about Gate to Repentance? What about Derech Hashem, the way of God? About why God created the world, the purpose of man, reincarnation, right? Reincarnation, the purpose of the nations, right? So therefore, this whole point is, why do we focus on Pirkei Avos? What was the purpose of doing Pirkei Avos? Because that's something universal.
Ethics, yeah, totally ethics.
It's universal, right? Was the purpose of doing this to go through the Noahide laws? No. Is it Torah? 100% it's Torah. 100% it's Torah. No difference. Am I going into depth to the laws of Shabbos? No. Totally not. The focus here is to understand what God wants from me, ethically. And that's why we've done more than 100 shows, a lot more than 100 shows, going relatively slowly, understanding what God wants from me.
That's the whole point, yeah.
So the point is that ethics applies to everybody. This is not just we're saying this is only a class for Noahites. Not true. There are Jews that are going to get something out of this. That applies to them. It applies to non-Jews. Ethics across the board. Who says it doesn't apply? It applies equally to Jews and non-Jews. There are plenty of things ethically non-Jews have to do. There's a heck of a lot more that we have to do. I don't think there's any question. But Pirkei Avos is something universal for everybody. It just so happens.
Yeah, 100%.
It just so happens it's on a Saturday afternoon. So who's going to watch this on a Saturday afternoon? Non-Jews. Right? But it applies equally to Jews as it does to non-Jews. So we're not saying it's going one way or the other. And it only applies to non-Jews. We're not saying that. Not at all. Jews are going to get something out of this. It's something they have to know. Right?
Agreed. Yeah. Yeah.
So someone's going to say, well, Pirkei Avos is only for Jews. Not true. Ethics applies to non-Jews as well. So since it applies to non-Jews, and there are going to be a lot of non-Jews watching this, and a lot of JITs watching this, Jews in training, right? So if a person's not Jewish, or they're going to become Jewish at some point, so why? This is not only for Noah. Jews shouldn't be watching this right now. Any Jew should stop watching, because it's Shabbos for them. Shabbos applies to Jews, doesn't necessarily apply to non-Jews. Most aspects of Shabbos, right? So the point is that this is universal, right? Non-Jews have their obligations. Jews have their obligations. But I would say, ethics are going to apply. Let's make clear. Ethics are going to apply a heck of a lot more to Jews that they're going to be obligated in than non-Jews, right? I'll give an example. We could talk about the mitzvah says in Leviticus chapter 19, talk about not taking revenge, right? What does it mean not to take revenge? Not taking revenge over here means that if somebody, let's say, I want to borrow someone's, I want to borrow the lawnmower. And they say, no, I'm not going to lend it to you. So he asked them, listen, my backyard's like a jungle. Why don't you let me, you let me use it? He doesn't let you use it. 2 weeks later, you happen to borrow someone else's or you got your own, and this person comes to you. This person comes to you and says, can I borrow your lawnmower? Mine's broke. So you say no. Why do you say no? You say no, and you give it, let's say better. You say no, and then you give them a reason. You say, I'm not going to let you borrow my lawnmower because you didn't let me borrow yours. That's a total prohibition for a Jew taking revenge. Right? 100%. Right? So that's taking revenge. Now, a Jew's not allowed to do that. What about a non-Jew? Is that something universal? So I could argue it's not universal. Why would I argue that? I would argue for a non-Jew, if you would ask most non-Jews, this person didn't let me borrow their pencil. Now he comes to me, says, can I borrow your pencil? I say, no. I'm not going to let you do that because you didn't borrow mine. You don't let me borrow yours. That's taking revenge. Now, if you would ask a Jew or a non-Jew, secular Jew or a non-Jew, and you would ask them, does that make sense? So a person may say, you know what? Maybe it's not such a good quality to have. Be bigger than the other person. Even if they wouldn't lend you, you should lend them. Forget about it. Just lend it to them. What could you answer? So some people would say, be the bigger person. Okay? Be the bigger person. What if you don't want to be the bigger person? This person ticked you off. This person totally ticked you off over here. If that's true, and they ticked you off, so you can say, I'm not lending you. Like my Rebbe would say, go eat kugel. You don't like it, too bad. That's the way it is. Now, would that apply to a non-Jew? How would that apply to a non-Jew? Shouldn't apply to a non-Jew. Right? Taking revenge. I don't know. Is that universal? For a Jew, it makes sense because we have no choice. Right? We have to be bigger than other people. We have to take greater responsibility. We have to have bigger responsibility. So if we have bigger responsibility, I have to be more careful. Now, you could tell a non-Jew could say, it's probably not the best thing to take revenge against someone else. Is that their obligation? Is that their obligation? I wouldn't say that. Why would I say it's their obligation? Right? That's what I would say. What's the obligation? Right? The point over here is that, there are a lot of things non-Jews have to know. There are 7 laws. There are 7 Noahide laws. But there are about 70 altogether. 65, 70, but they're in depth. You're right. There are 7 laws. Right? There's idolatry, forbidden sexual relationships, murder, all these things, theft. So let me ask. I'm going to ask the $1.5 million question. If I were to ask somebody, okay, the Torah says you're not allowed to steal. Right? Torah says you're not allowed to steal. Now, if the Torah says you're not allowed to steal, right, what does that mean? Torah didn't give me any definition for a Jew or non-Jew. And the definitions are going to change. Some things are going to apply equally to Jews and non-Jews. Other things may apply to Jews that don't apply to non-Jews. Right? So if someone doesn't convert in there, let's look at the bigger picture. Let's look at the bigger picture. Right? The bigger picture is a person has to know what to do. Whether they're a Jew or they're a non-Jew. Right? They have to know what to do. Before conversion, what's a non-Jew? What's the status of a non-Jew? The status of a non-Jew de facto would be a Noahide. If they're a Jew in training, they're allowed to keep mitzvahs that apply to Jews. They can't desecrate Shabbos, right? Sorry. They have to desecrate Shabbos. 100% they have to desecrate Shabbos to show they're not doing it like a Jew. And someone who's a Jew in training has to know what they're allowed to do, what they're obligated in, right? Kashrus, Shabbos, blessings, all these things, 100% true, right? But at the same time, before conversion, even if they're de facto Noahide, they have to know what applies to them also. But bottom line is, before someone converts, even if they're learning what the Torah says and what it means, if they're a de facto Noahide in general, so what does it mean not to kill? Is abortion murder for a non-Jew? What would be the simple answer? Everyone will say, yeah, it's murder. At what point? At what point is it murder? For a Jew, if you kill the fetus for whatever reason, in general, where we're going to say it's forbidden, within 30 days, not murder. After 30 days, considered a living entity. If a non-Jew kills within that time, it could be liable. That could apply to them and not apply to Jews. Right? Right? That's fine. Right? But the bottom line is a lot of things the Torah says, 90% or more. What the Torah says does not give me any definitions. Right? You have to watch the last 2 weeks I spoke about Karaites. Right? The last 3 weeks ago and 2 weeks ago. I spoke about Karaites on Tanakh Talk. That don't believe in oral law. But the aspect over here of ethics applies equally in many ways to Jews as it does to non-Jews. Right? So the $1 million question, or $1.5 million question would be, so why would I recommend ethics of our fathers, to someone who wants to convert? Because it applies to them. 100% it applies to them. Jew and non-Jew it applies. It might apply less in certain ways to non-Jews, and we point that out in many different ways. Right? But the point is it applies. 100% it applies. So even if there are Noahides watching, what, Jews in training can't watch? A Jew can't watch? A Jew might tell me, if they know something, say, what do I have to listen to you for? So after my last Tanakh Talk video, everyone, someone commented, don't listen to him. What does he know? Okay, don't listen to me. Not saying anyone's got an obligation over here. So listen. But ethics applies to everybody. It applies to Jews and non-Jews. This just happens to be a Noahide group. Okay? 100%. It's a Noahide group.
Rabbi, I guess what set it off is that this person just called Noahides nonsense. And I'm like, well, you're on the Noahide World Center channel. I mean, and you just come in and call us nonsense. I mean,
All right, there's a
and
comment.
we try to be patient. We think, okay, is this another Christian missionary, or is this odds are that when you listen a little bit, you can tell they're visually in the stage of converting. And so then I inquired, and the person, they said they were converting. And I mean, this is a big problem for Noahides getting established. I mean, there are always those that seem to think there's more for everybody.
I'll tell you what the problem is. The problem is people want to learn. There are a lot of people who want to learn, right? They want to learn Torah. That's good. People want to learn Torah, but what's the bottom line? What's the bottom line? They want to know what the Torah says about, X, Y, and Z.
What about Aaron's was it Aaron's sons who brought strange fire into
right.
I mean, where's the line of profanity? I mean, is my question. And they crossed the boundary, right? They crossed the boundary visibly and did something that wasn't asked of them. And I find this often with a lot of fence sitters seem to think, well, I might want to convert, so I'm going to call you Noahides as not thirsty or hungry enough. And you're missing out.
Right,
so
but the point, I want to make another point. And the points, the point over here is, that how am I going to know what to do? if I don't have guidance.
Of course.
See, this is a problem. This is a problem because people are going to say, I already do this. I already know this. I already understand this. But guess what? That's not necessarily true. I've had people tell me, I've had Jews tell me I'm a good person. Now, they didn't say I'm a moral person. They said I'm a good person. Now, a good person, we could interpret as saying that they're saying I'm moral. They could say that, right? So I had this person in conversation. So I felt it was my only opportunity. I said, great, what's your definition of good? So I started going further. I said, people think they're allowed to cheat on their taxes because Uncle Sam takes too much. That's stealing, right? Euthanasia is killing somebody who we want to get rid of them for our sake, and they're suffering. Get them out of our heads, because they're suffering. Okay. Isn't that murder? Isn't that murder? That's murder. Right? But they're going to say that's not murder. They're going to say that's mercy. That's absolute mercy. Now we hold it's murder. Right? We hold that's murder. Now, that being said, let's keep in mind one thing. This person stopped the conversation at that point because they saw where it was going. They saw exactly where it was going. But they're going to say, I'm good, I'm this, I'm that. They don't know nothing. They don't know nothing about nothing. If they don't know nothing about nothing, then what are they saying? Right? Right? So they shouldn't comment. They shouldn't say anything. Because they don't know. But someone could, again, if we look at what the Torah says and what the commentary says, right, and what the rabbis tell us, and a person says, I'm good, I'm moral, I do good things, I'm not a bad person. Now, we can break that down. We 100%, we 100% could break that down and show that maybe that person's not as good as they think they are. Now, we're in the month of Elul. We just started the month of Elul. It's all about introspection. What do we read in the month of Elul? What books do we read in the month of Elul? Path of the Just. Right? What do we read? Gate to Repentance. Right? We read duties. What's it called? The Ways of the Righteous. Why do we read these books? Because they're books about Musa. They're books about Musa. Right?
That reminds me, I got a question here, Rabbi, from a gentleman in India. Vishal's asking about fasting and repentance for Noahides. Hang on, let me just find his question.
Yeah, I saw the question. Question earlier. The question was,
can a Noahide fast to repentance?
No, doesn't apply.
That's what I said. I said not.
It doesn't apply. They want to repent. They certainly can repent, right? But the Torah says there's an obligation. There's an obligation to make the body suffer, right? To suffer on Yom Kippur. What does it mean to suffer? To annoy, to afflict themselves. What does it mean to afflict themselves? Right? Afflicting themselves means yeah, that's what the rabbis tell us. It means to fast. Right? It means to fast. So if it means to fast and we get a Day of Atonement, does that apply to non-Jews? It doesn't. It doesn't. Right? So if it doesn't apply to non-Jews, it doesn't apply. Then it's irrelevant. Now, is there repentance? Let's ask a better question. The better question is, or stronger question, is there repentance by a non-Jew in general? Of course, so what's the proof? Bring me proof that there's repentance for a non-Jew. I'll give you two easy proofs. One is, you see, by Cain and Abel. Right? Abel brings best of the flock. God eats up the korban, eats up the sacrifice. What did Cain bring? Flax. He put flax on the altar. Right? You know, Dan, if you brought your wife a bunch of dandelions, you put it in a cup and you say, here, this is for you. She's going to take it and throw it in your face. Right? But God, what does he do? He's upset. Because Cain brought dandelions. You brought dandelions. But God wanted to bring him back to repentance. Was Cain Jewish? Not at all. Nobody says Cain was Jewish. But what's a greater example? What's a greater example? Book of Jonah. What's the book of Jonah talk about? Jonah has to go to the big city. He has to go to Nineveh. 100% he has to go to Nineveh. Right? He has to go to Nineveh. And what happens? Who's the king of Nineveh? Pharaoh. God kept him alive. God kept him alive. So if that's true, Pharaoh understood. Pharaoh understood that. If Pharaoh understood it, they all repented, and God didn't kill them. So those are two clear-cut proofs non-Jews can repent. Does it have anything to do with confession? Has nothing to do with confession. Nothing to do with confession. Zero to do with confession. So they're allowed to. 100%, they're allowed to repent. Right? Let's keep in mind one thing. The Noahide laws are all learned from the Torah. They're all verses they learned from the Torah. You know, and then there are questions. What applies to them? What doesn't apply to them? Right? So that a person has to know. But see, the point over here is, and this is a good thing, you know, just a good thing to digress on. The point is, so why would Noahide have to learn ethics? Why would a non-Jew or JIT, why would they have to learn about ethics? You're going to say, don't ethics only apply to Jews? No.
No, it's relevant to everybody.
It totally is. And when it comes to Rosh Hashanah, most people are not aware, non-Jews get judged. Non-Jews get judged. Right? They get judged like everyone else. Now, if that's true, don't they have to go through Rosh Hashanah like we do? No. They have to know they're getting judged. They have to know the judgment. They have to know. They have to know all this. Doesn't mean they have to spend, 6 hours twice, two times in a row in synagogue doing that. Certainly not. Right? Certainly not. The point being that there are a lot of things Noahides have to know. 100%. That they have to know in order that, it's confusing here. 100% is confusing. But ethics applies to everyone. I don't think there's any question. It applies to everyone. Non-Jews should learn ethics. They should learn Musar. Right? They should read these books, Path of the Just, The Ways of the Righteous. They should read these books to show how a person can change and what they should do. That's not irrelevant. That's not irrelevant over here. Totally not irrelevant. So, no, it's fine. I just wanted to point out that these things apply equally. So what we're doing here, Jews can get understanding from non-Jews. Can get understanding. Even if they're a JIT, applies to everyone. But when it comes to non-Jews in general, a moral imperative doesn't mean they're obligated. Let's make that clear. Doesn't mean they're obligated. What it means is it's a good thing for them to do, but who says they have to do it? Who says they have to do it? Right. 100%. So this is going to apply to everybody. Right? To everybody over here. So the point is, we'll get back to the point here. Right? And what's the difference and what's better between knowledge and memorization? Right? There are different ways to learn. People make the claim, there's nothing to learn for Noahide. Can't learn Talmud. Right? It's the main thing. Can't learn this, can't learn that, the other thing. There are plenty of things for Noahides to learn. They can't learn exactly the same way a Jew learns. That's also true, and that's a whole discussion. Right? 100%, that's a whole discussion. Which, I spoke about for Noahide nations. That's a whole discussion. How in-depth they're allowed to go. But even for a Jew, you can't just learn things superficially. If you learn things superficially, you'll never know anything. Or let's say better, you'll never understand anything. If you do things so in depth, you'll never know anything. 100% you'll never know anything. Right? So the point over here is you got to learn in depth and you got to cover ground. I always say Noahides, I can teach for the next 250 years, keep them busy. There's plenty what to learn. I was just, catching up a little bit during my break for the last 2 weeks, catching up and, learning Tanakh. I'm at the beginning of Isaiah. Just got to Isaiah chapter 5, somewhere in the middle. Unbelievable depth there. Just learning Tanakh, what he's talking about. Right? And what's going on. And, Vilna Gaon, Rabbi Elijah Vilna, more than 250 years ago. Yeah, I got a lot to say over here of what, their parables here, what it refers to, in a deeper way. There's a lot there. There's a lot there. So a person can learn in depth. They can cover ground, but you need to cover ground also. You need both. Right? So the point I want to get to, before we get a little bit sidetracked, was that when it comes to practical Jewish law, most people learning how to learn, and that's when they're younger, they're not learning practical law from the Talmud, per se. They're going to learn it from other things. Practical laws, they have to learn about Hanukkah, and about Tefillin, and about all the holidays, different things. That they have to learn. Right? But when it comes to learning Talmud, and that's where we learn everything from, and what the commentaries say, and the early ones, later ones, modern ones, that's where we get everything from, but they're not necessarily learning practical Jewish law from it. Right? They're learning how to think the way the Talmud thinks, how to be analytical. And guess how long it can take to be, to learn how to do that? Years. Can be a number of years. Right? A child starts learning Talmud at the age of 11. Right? I would say by the age, 16, 17, 18, they start learning much more in depth. Much more in depth. Right? So, that's not getting to practical Jewish law. That's a whole different thing. But you have to know how to be analytical. And that's what they're learning in Shiva. Hours upon hours. How to analyze. How to go a little bit deeper. What do they disagree on? That's different levels. Because I get questions all the time, as we mentioned. Rashi will say like this, someone else say like that. Why they disagree? That's a different level. But you have to understand what they say. Understanding what they say is a whole different world. It's a whole different world. So, right. But learning how to learn, see, that's why in the modern Orthodox community, they'll say, come on, he's 18, he's got to go to college. He's got to go to university. You might have such a grueling schedule, 2 mornings, 2 afternoons a week. But you got to give him an opportunity to develop, to see if he can become something in learning. Because Rashi says the Levim, there are 2 places where the Torah says the Levites started serving in the temple at the age of 25 to the age of 30. There's a 5-year difference. Why? Difference of opinion, right? Torah says two things. Both can't be right. Right? So Rashi says, why do you have the extra 5 years? To see, you let him learn for 5 years to see what he can become. Because that's the time for him to learn. To see if he can become something in learning. Oh, but he's already learned for 18 years. Yeah, he's only learning how to learn for a few years. You got to give him the opportunity. So Rashi over there says, within 5 years, if he doesn't have success, he'll never have success. He's not going to have success no matter what he does. But if he starts to have success, he'll continue to have success. That's why you need the 5 years. But see, in the modern Orthodox world, they say, come on, you got to get a job, got to do something real. You ask, modern Orthodox family, your son has the opportunity to be an accountant, a lawyer, a doctor, or a rabbi. Which one would you pick? You pick the first three, not the fourth. Why? Because that's what's more important. You've already learned. Come on, you've already learned enough. But you got to give him an opportunity. You got to give him an opportunity to be something. If you don't give him that opportunity, come on. And I've seen even people who go into rabbinics, they pass the requisite exams, let's say in the laws of Shabbos and Kashrus and other things. How much have they really learned? I'm not saying they didn't cover ground and learn certain things, If they're learning the laws of Shabbos, they learn the whole tractate? No. They didn't. I guarantee you they didn't. Because the halacha parts come in different places. It doesn't come in, in the entire tractate. They learned, kashrus. They learned all of Chulin. The tractate speaks about it. No, only a couple chapters. When I saw this, when I was going to, study, become a rabbi, I said, this is not the way to go. And that my Rebbe convinced me straight away. When I told him I want to go out and do Jewish outreach, and my kids were, two of my older kids were much younger, blah, blah, blah. And he told me, don't be like one of these Mickey Mouse rabbis. Sit and learn. You have money, sit and learn. And he was right. Because I learned a heck of a lot. He just didn't tell me it'd be so hard to find a job and have a resume yay long. Okay, that was a different issue. But if I would have gone out, I could have been successful maybe in other places, but I wouldn't have had the knowledge. And I see what happens when people don't have knowledge. Not only they make mistakes, they do crazy things. People that I know that are rabbis of certain communities, God forbid what's going on, what they're doing, right? Bring Baptists come to speak, bring other people, leave your mind open till their brains fall on the floor. That's horrific. Horrific. And I thank God I'm not part of that community. I have a lot of gratitude. That community brought me where I am, no question about it. 100% they brought me where I am. But for the most part, it's a walking disaster. Because they have 2 feet in the religious world. In the secular world, a quarter of a foot in the religious world. It's a disaster. It's an absolute disaster. Right? The point is that you got to give someone an opportunity. You got to give them the opportunity to see what they can become. Now, again, in my case, maybe I would have been successful anyway. Even if I had less knowledge. Because when you're out in the field, you don't learn as much. Now, I remember when I was in South America, I had fixed time to learn. When I got to Lakewood, I had fixed time to learn before I was involved in other things. So I came back and people sort of, joked. They said, oh, so what'd you learn when you were there? I was gone 4 years, 3.5 years, let's say. So I went through 3.5 tractates. Almost finished the 4th one before I got back. I sat and learned 3 hours. People knew they couldn't get a hold of me before 11:30 in the morning. I wouldn't answer the phone. From 8:30 to 11:30, I had 3 hours. Sit and learn. That's what I did. I went through a lot. No question. Knowledge is power. But yeah, what did we say before? What's crucial in all this? You need guidance. If you don't have guidance, all the knowledge in the world doesn't matter. We're going to speak about this when I'm probably about 102. if I make it that far. Right? Maybe we'll get there in the next millennium. But this is something that's crucial. You have to learn by other people. You have to have what they call shimush. You have to have practical application from someone bigger than you that can teach you. Or you can go through the material and they can guide you. See, without that, you're nothing. You're nothing. You can have that practical knowledge, but you need greater people to go to. See, I have the Torah giant of the generation I could go to with anything. Knew everything about everything. Lots of damages, marriage, divorce, all kinds of things. Right? Practical things that came to, blessing, Shabbos. Knew everything about everything. I could ask him whatever I wanted. So I was very spoiled. But he ingrained in my head, and I'll give this over as many times as I can, maybe in different ways. But there's nothing more important than having guidance. And the right guidance. Because if you don't have the right guidance, or you think you can do it on your own, and you're your own Rebbe, well, do me a favor. Don't listen to such a person. Because that's the criteria. One of the main criteria is to know if someone's the real deal or not, who they learn under, and who do they go to for questions. One of the rabbinical courts, spoke to me years ago about what I do, and it was very strange because I don't meet most of the people I deal with, and I do this over the phone, and I'm doing it online, and blah blah blah. So they asked me a whole bunch of different questions, and they wanted to know, where I came from, where I learned, and then they asked me the $1 million question. $1.5 million question, who's your Rebbe? Who do you go to? Who's your Das Torah? So everybody knows who my Das Torah is. I told him I quote you more than anybody else. He goes, I don't know about that. I said, I quote you for good. Right? When I mentioned his name, there were no other questions. Based-In had no other questions from me. I said, how do you know I'm not lying? He said, I mentioned another great rabbi that, I had a connection to. Not as good as, my Rebbe, but, I name dropped a little bit. They said, because no one's going to make that up. I go, you never know. You never know what I might make up or not. But, that was it. That was the end of the conversation because this person's the real deal. He's the Torah giant of the generation, according to everybody. Right? I don't think there's any question. They just don't look at him that way because more of we'll just call a fanatic. That's the way they look at him. But he's the Torah giant of the generation. There's nothing to talk about. Nothing to talk about. Nobody like him. Nobody.
Yeah.
It's got a connection to that previous generation. That's crucial.
No, that's
you need somebody
so correct.
You need someone that's greater than you, in order to give you guidance.
Well, didn't we read
and
that
the people
already
that
in the
fail,
Mishna about making for yourself a teacher?
Right. We spoke about that.
Yep.
Right, but the point, we did speak about that. We spoke about that earlier, the first chapter.
Yeah.
Crucial. Right, but the point is, and I've seen it, with my own eyes, and that is people don't have this, they fall by the wayside. They do things that aren't right. They rely on things they should never rely on. Right? Leniency they should never rely on. They do things that, God should have mercy on them. Because, I sort of just keep dibs on, some people just to see, like, what they're doing and whatever, let's say on Facebook or whatever. And I'm like, thank God I'm not part of that.
Oh, yeah. The Kabbalah nuts people, yeah.
There's just craziness.
Yeah.
Why would you bring, like, go to a church and they have a Baptist choir and this and that, like, or you bring one of these people into your synagogue to speak. For what? For what? We'll bring these people in for nothing. Oh, you're showing solidarity, blah, blah. Forget solidarity. You don't have anything to do with these people. Right? Nothing. They have nothing to offer. There was a whole controversy about, Boca Raton. This one Orthodox rabbi had a, missionary come. Now, someone said not a top tier missionary, whatever. And he came to speak, motivational speaker. Now, the first time someone else wanted to come, they stopped it. They put a lot of pressure on, the person backed down. Not the rabbi, the person backed down. This time it didn't back down. This time it went through. Can't find a Jewish motivational speaker. You got to find a non-Jew as a missionary to boot, even if he's not going to missionize. I wouldn't let him speak out of my bathroom. If I had my own synagogue, he wouldn't speak out of my bathroom. I'd lock him in the bathroom. You don't give someone like that a pedestal to speak. Not in a synagogue. I don't care if it's not by the pulpit. Not if it's a recreational room or a kitchen or whatever. You don't let him speak. You don't give him a pedestal, for goodness sakes. What, you leave your mind open till your brains fall on the floor? You got to be careful who you listen to. I just saw someone make a video. It was very good.
100%.
That they were saying that if you're going to listen to somebody, you're going to listen to someone who's called a rabbi on YouTube. That's what I've been called, right? He's only a rabbi on YouTube, whatever. Do they quote sources? Or they make it up as they go along? He says the most important thing, you want to see someone who knows what they're doing, let them quote sources. But they have to quote the source. They can't just, they can't quote the source and then just make up their own interpretation. So I've seen that also. And that's misleading. That's misleading. You can quote something and show people, and you can even show it on the screen in Hebrew, which no one can read Hebrew, so that doesn't matter, right? But if you show it on screen, interpret it the way it needs to be interpreted, right? 100%. That's the bottom line. That's the bottom line. And I'm just gonna, I'll point this out. That, yeah, I called someone on it. And they said, yeah, I know. No, don't tell me you know. Go out and say, I'm going to make an apology. This is not what it says. They didn't do that. But see, I called them out on it.
Yeah, they should be
retracting. I said, you can say whatever you want. I said, you can say whatever you want about me. You are misleading people. What you said is misleading. He didn't back down. He admitted it. He admitted, yeah, I said this doesn't apply. Totally doesn't apply. So how can you tell people that that's what it means? Checkmate. But the person didn't back down and said, okay, whatever. Blew it off. Can't blow it off. Right? One of my personal pet peeves. You cannot mislead other people. It's forbidden to mislead other people, even by non-Jews. 100%.
Excellent. Well said.
You cannot mislead other people. And I see it a lot. And sometimes I'll speak about it, other times maybe not. But that is a huge problem. And in the Noahide world, it's a humongous problem. Humongous problem. Because you got enough people out there don't know what they're doing. And they'll be teaching Kabbalah. They'll tell you I can keep Shabbos. Wink, wink, wink. Some people say we can't keep Shabbos. Wink, wink, wink. Yeah, you can't. Certain things about it you could do, right? But a lot of things you can't do.
Liable.
So, yeah. So the problem is these people have no accountability. My Rebbe once told me, he said, if you're out of line, I'll tell you you're out of line. I said, good. And he did. Trust me. A number of times I was out of line, right? I don't want to digress here. The point is you need someone who's qualified, who knows what they're doing, who's got real credentials.
Agreed.
Someone will say, one second, this rabbi doesn't have a beis din. He doesn't have his own rabbinical court. So they can't take him seriously. What? I can't give classes and send people to beis din? That invalidates me from giving classes? Not at all. He says, all I can do is write a letter. Yeah, because I don't live in the community. I can't be a sponsoring rabbi. But guess what? My letter's worth something. You know why? Because I have credentials. If you have credentials, that's a different thing. And that I'm going to take offense to. And even if the person's a quack, and even if the person, has no leg to stand on and they don't know very much, that we're going to take a little bit personally. Why? I don't work the last 30 years for nothing. You want to say, I don't know this about Tanakh? You're right. I'm not a world expert in this, world expert at that. Fine. Right? You're not going to take away knowledge, though. Am I perfect? Not at all. Right? I'm fallible just like anyone else. And when I say, this is my opinion, take it with a grain of salt. Okay. But someone at the very end, of Tanakh Talk I did on Friday, I saw it just recently went up. Sorry, late Thursday night.
Yeah, it was a great
whatever.
One.
And, someone at the end says, what do you listen to him for? He doesn't have anything to offer. Okay. No one has to listen to me. They don't think I have anything to offer. Go elsewhere. You want to be a troll? Okay. You got nothing better to do with your life. Be a troll. Right? But that doesn't take away that the message isn't good. You had a question before?
Oh, no. I find when you share Torah, if it's something that you're well familiar with, you'll dig in and won't let anybody tell you otherwise, because you know what you know. It's been passed on. You can tell that there's been a certain degree of transmission passed on. And I think you're doing a
Listen,
wonderful job with
again,
Pirkei
we're
Avos.
not fallible. We don't say, we don't make a mistake. I had somebody, for a long time constantly ask me questions, and then when I give an answer, and say, "Well, this other rabbi disagrees," or "I saw this other." I said, "Okay, so why are you asking me?" A lot of what I say is based on what other great people say. It's not my own. And a lot of it I'll quote from my Rebbe. You want to argue, you can argue with him. He's a Torah giant of the generation. You don't always have to agree with him. Fine. There are other people that disagree with him. That's also fine. Right? It's not a problem. Definitely not a problem. Right? But, one thing, though, that there must be, unless the person's an absolute heretic, what there must be is, even if you disagree, there's respect. And you have to have respect. And there are plenty of people out there, they don't have respect. They think, "Oh, that's your opinion." Okay. Am I going to sit there, "Hey, these are my credentials, this is what I've done"? I'm not going to waste my time. You want to say I'm wrong and you got proof? Okay, show me. I'll look into it. If I'm wrong, I'll admit I'm wrong. Or if I misquoted it, I'll admit it. It's what people are looking for. Take you off your pedestal. Fine. Am I the end all information? Certainly not.
We appreciate you, Rabbi, for all the hard study you've done.
No one's obligated to listen. They certainly don't have to listen, right? But at the end of the day, you want to disagree. Fine. Not everyone has to agree. Either bring proof that you're right, or at least, at the very least, you got to be respectful. If the person is a heretic, you can call them out. That's not lashon hara, and that you're obligated to do. Right? I wouldn't say overkill. I think some people are overkill, but it doesn't have to be overkill. What it means is, you want to call someone out. You call someone out and say, "Don't listen to them because they said this, that, and the other thing." That you got to be careful of. 100%. That way you got to be careful of. There's my daughter just got back from the States on Friday, and they happened to be, they were in San Diego, and then they were on the shore, the Jersey Shore, for a few days. And just, one thing is clear, somebody points out. One thing is clear, and that is we are affected by our surroundings. 100% we're affected by our surroundings. And you got to be careful. We got to be careful who we hang out with. Someone asked me, and I'll give you the answer to the question. Someone asked me a couple years ago, right, as before COVID, someone asked me, do you live with secular Jews? Or do you have secular Jews that are your friends? So I said no, in general. I mean, there are people I'm in contact with, okay, but no, I wouldn't say necessarily so close, regardless of family or not. But that was my answer. So the person said, "See, you guys are, what's the word, closed-minded, and all that." So what I should have answered, and I'm going to give everyone the answer here. If someone says that, "Oh, you only hang out with people who think like you," well, you can flip the script and say, "Well, you do the same thing." I should have said, "How many Orthodox Jews you hang out with?" That's what I should have said. I didn't think to say it. But that's the obvious answer. You're going to tell me, "Yeah, I don't hang out with secular Jews." You're right. I hang out with people who think like me. I hang out with people that keep what I keep, even to a higher level. 100%. Do you hang out with people that don't think like you? Oh, sure, yeah. Orthodox Jews? No. Why not? I think it's pretty obvious. Right? I think it's pretty obvious. So, but a person, what's the whole point of Yom Kippur? The whole point of Yom Kippur is to say, "Chatanu, I've sinned. I've made a mistake." It's not forbidden to say I made a mistake. The Brisker Rav of Israel Zev Soloveitchik, a blessed memory, said it's better to say "I don't know" than to give a bad answer. Yeah. So some people think they have to know everything about everything and give an answer. You don't necessarily give an answer straight away. Rabbi ingrained in me in this. I don't know if he succeeded as well. But I'll say, think before you answer. Don't just answer. Unless you know 100%. Think. Right? Want to teach me how to think. So it's better to say "I don't know" than give a bad answer. And a lot of people think I have to answer this, answer that. You don't necessarily have to. right? But the point is you have to know where to go. You have to know who's good, who's not good, to listen to. And, I think people, have to know this. Do I think every 5 minutes I should be putting up there, don't listen to this one, don't listen? I'm not going to do that. Someone asks me, I'll tell them. But otherwise, not going to, say too much unless something comes up. Right? But here, what's crucial? What's crucial is everybody needs guidance. Even if it's someone that knows less than you, per se, or knows as much as you. Why would a person go to guidance for them? Let's say the person is equal or knows a little bit less, because you're asking them a question, trying to get clarity, they may be able to help you. When it says make for yourself a rabbi, it doesn't necessarily mean someone is, at the top of their game. It could be someone who knows more than them, like a mentor that can help them, that can guide them. You have to know if they can or not. But it doesn't mean someone at the same level. See, that's the novelty. Doesn't mean someone has to be at the same level. Right? Or someone at such a higher level. Could be at the same level, but they can help them look at things in a different way. Right? But, bottom line, everybody needs guidance. Everybody. I don't think there's any question. No question about it. And, you have to know who to go to over here. So here, right? So here, we're talking about, covering ground and understanding what it means, what practical Jewish law is. So, Rabbi says, the Gemara in Kedushin, 38, see, we're going to quote the source, means that the verse that tells us to teach children to our children, right? When we say the Shema, we say, Vishinantam livanecha. We should teach our children. What does that mean? What does that verse mean? It means that when a person asks you a question, it doesn't mean just teaching them. It means having the knowledge at the tip of your tongue. It means when someone asks you a question, you don't have to think of an answer. You don't have to go to Rabbi Dr. Google to look for an answer. You have it at the tip of your tongue. That's what it means to teach Torah to your children. You got to have the answer at the tip of your tongue. Now, so we've spoken a little bit, about, different aspects of learning. One thing for sure that people don't like to do, right? We'll mention that. And that is, we said there's a difference between knowledge and memory and sharpness and depth of understanding, right? Let's talk about memory. What do people like to do? Or let's say better, what do people not like to do? People do not like to review. Why don't they like to review? Why don't they like to review? Because they want to learn something new. But the problem is, what happens if I don't review? If I don't review what I know, then I'll forget. Then it's like plowing without seeding. So, even if you want to learn something new, you have to review what you did. And then go learn something new, but you have to review. And review today, people don't necessarily like to do, but it's stressed tremendously in yeshivas. Tremendously stressed. And that's what I have to do. You have to learn and review and review and review. Because that's how you remember. Right? But again, if you know, let's say better, if you know what the Talmud says, and you understand what it says, right, then you can give it over to others. There has to be clarity. 100% there has to be clarity. So a person has to learn. A person has to learn and go over and over and over. But going over and over is thinking also, what do the commentaries say? What do they agree? What do they disagree? You're not just going through the words. That's not what review is. It's not just going through the text itself. It's understanding what's going on. Right? But when a person has good memory, some people have better memories, some people not. Right? So I was telling someone a while ago, they asked me, they saw me when I was learning, I was writing things down. So they said, you write everything down? I said, all right, what this commentary says, what the Rambam, let's say, brings down, some other things, and I'll get to the practical law. But see, when I'm writing it down, that's going to help me remember. Now, other people write things more in depth, less in depth, whatever it is. Maybe they'll just write, how it comes out practically, what the disagreements are a little bit, and that's it. Right? Whatever, different people have different styles, different needs. How they're going to remember things. Right? But if you don't, I'm not saying you have to write things down. I think it's a good thing to do. Because you're not going to remember. You're not going to remember, the tip of your tongue. So you write it down, then you review it. See if you can read your own writing. Then you review it. That's how you remember. So it's one thing to have the knowledge. You go through certain things, but you got to remember, you got to review. People don't like that. People do not like that. Maybe they'll review it once. Maybe. But the reality is that people want to cover ground. See, when it comes to learning anything within Judaism, let's say things that are more complex, Shabbos, laws of Shabbos, laws of kashrus, blessings, you have to constantly review until it becomes second nature. Till you know exactly what you're doing. You might have to look things up here and there, right? But, again, certainly for a Jew, they want to put something on a hot plate on Shabbos, they have to know how to do it. Practically speaking, you have to know how to do it, but you have to review. It comes up every week. Blessings come up every day. Does this apply? It doesn't apply. How does it apply? You have to know. That's why the class I give on blessings, it's what's behind what you're doing first. Understand the mechanics, and then, okay, let's go practical. Same thing with laws of kashrus. There are many practical axioms of kashrus that a person will know what may be a question in their kitchen, what may not be. And that's also pretty crucial. Because, you're going to have to go to your local Orthodox rabbi, ask the question, right? But let's say you understand if a person mixed milk and meat and neither were hot, then I don't have an issue here. I just have to wash it off, really. Right? I don't have an issue over here. If there's a transfer of heat, I have an issue. So they have to know what the question is. And by them, they're going to know if it's cold, I definitely have less of an issue or no issue. If it's piping hot, I have a major issue. Maybe. Depends what it is. You have to know how nullification works. But you have to know the base of what you're doing. That when it comes to practical law, that's what you need to do. For Noahites, no different. They also have to know. Right? They also have to know over here. What to do, but they have to know what's the base. See, all these conversion classes, right, are all based on why am I doing this or why am I doing that? What's behind what I'm doing? So if you understand the mechanics, okay, now it's just practical things. That's why I always say, my first class on the laws of Shabbos, you can't ask me why you're not allowed to tear toilet paper. That's not the question right now. Question is, why do I keep Shabbos? What's the purpose? Everything else is detail. But you have to know. You have to know what to do. But I think it's more important to know why you're doing it, even if we say, well, it's a decree. It's a divine decree. But we try and figure out what the reasons. Could be many reasons for different things. Some things we don't have any answers for. Some things we have good answers, better answers, not good answers, whatever. It's all divine decree. That's why I'm doing anything. When it comes to ethics, it's a little more, what would the English say? A little bit dicey. It's a little bit dicey. Because certain things may not be morally problematic. They may not be morally problematic. But it could be that a non-Jew shouldn't do it anyway. It's just not good for them. There are many things that the evil inclination will tell us to do. And even if technically speaking, let's say for instance, Game 7, NBA Finals on Friday night. Your team's in it. So you say, okay, what am I going to do? I can't watch it. Right? I can't turn it on. So what do? You leave the TV on. You don't change it, just leave it on. Yeah, if Shabbos merely go watch the game. Technically speaking, did you do anything wrong? You didn't do anything wrong. You didn't use a timer. You didn't do anything wrong. Technically speaking. But you're disgusting in God's eyes. Right? Why are you disgusting in God's eyes? Because that's not in the spirit of Shabbos. Not even the CFL is in the spirit of Shabbos. It's not in the spirit of Shabbos. It's not what I should be doing. Now, technically speaking, did I do anything wrong? No. Nothing wrong over here. Zero wrong. I didn't do anything wrong. Is that the way Shabbos should be observed? No. That's not the way it should be observed. 100%. But that's what you did. Can a person technically go window shopping on Shabbos? No. I mean, you could in theory. You're not buying anything, you're just looking in the window. It's forbidden. It's how it looks. It's not in the spirit of Shabbos. So there are things that are ethical issues that may not be forbidden per se. But a person has to stay away. Because we said before, a person 100% can be affected by their surroundings. And when they're affected by their surroundings, it's hard to fight against it. It's hard. You know, you go in a hostile environment of people who don't think the way you do and do things the way you do. They just say whatever they want. And they do whatever they want. It's, you know, they curse, they don't curse, they do this, they do that. It has an effect. 100% it has an effect. You're not in your own, you're not in your own environment. And that's a serious thing. 100% a serious thing. You know, and as we said before, going through the motions is not good enough. You know, a person wants to convert, okay. They'll tell the rabbis what they want to hear, they'll give it the answers, but you have to know why. To the best of our ability. Doesn't mean, even if you don't understand why, you still, you're not going to do it. Of course you're going to do it. But what's the problem? A person's under fire. Let's say there are other things going on. There's a lot of pressure. Tremendous amount of pressure. So now they're busy cleaning, doing this, doing that. They don't have any reason why. They don't understand why they're doing it. So again, this is where guidance comes in. Like someone said, I learned Torah, I feel like I'm under a lot of pressure. There's a lot of pressure in Torah. There's a lot of pressure in Torah. It's true. No, I had to have less. But if you want to be the real deal, Torah comes at a price. Weakens a person. Physically. When a person learns they use their brain power, weakens them. Right? But a person has to keep in mind, Torah wants us to hit high levels. It wants us to be the best we can be. That means I have to be careful what I think, what I say, a million different things. And then there's pressure. Comes before a holiday, a lot of pressure. Money pressure. There's, let's say, right after Yom Kippur, I got 3 days. Pick up my lulav, my esrog, put up my sukkah. So it could be you put up your sukkah before. Okay, I got 3 days. To, let's say, buy my lulav in esrog. Now, this year, I think sukkah's, Yom Kippur, I think, is on a Wednesday. Right? I think it's on a Wednesday. So it goes Wednesday night to Thursday night. Or Tuesday night to Wednesday night, let's say. So I got Thursday, Friday, Shabbos, and then Sunday is Sukkot. Doesn't give you a lot of time. Pick out your lulav and esrog. So you got to plan ahead of time. Some people will wait till the last minute anyway. Whatever. Other people not going to do that, so they'll buy it before. But see, you got to plan. Then you got meals to plan. You got other things. There's a lot to do. There's a lot to do. It's pressure. You got to get the sukkah done. You got whatever. There's a lot to do. Right? Someone recently asked me this. They said, "Is it normal?" Right? Let me get actually the exact. Let me get the exact quote here. It had to do with, is it normal Is it normal to feel pressure? Right? That was basically the question. Is that normal? Right? And the answer is yeah. Torah can be pressurized. Sometimes more, sometimes less. That's the question. That's the question over here. Is that the truth? Is it really like that? Right? Is it really like that? Does it have to be? The question was, is it normal for Torah study to cause stress? Now, what's the simple answer? Simple answer, I would say, yeah. Why? Think about it. You're reading Path of the Just in the month of Elul. You get to a chapter about cleanliness. And when he talks about cleanliness, it means cleanliness of thought, cleanliness of mind. When a person reads this, what's the problem? A person's going to say, come on, this is impossible to reach. This is impossible to reach. I have to control my mind. I have to control my thoughts. Is my mind totally clear from sin in this area, that area, the other area? How are we going to be able to answer in the affirmative? How are we going to say, yeah, I'm not affected by this. I'm not affected by that. I'm not affected by something else. How am I going to be able to say that? 100% where my mind is purely all the time focused on Torah mitzvahs. A person can say, you know what, forget it. Forget it. How am I, I can't get past that. I can't get past it. Impossible. Why is it impossible? Because I can't be held to that standard. It's too hard to be held to that standard. And some people can break from it. It just makes them weaker. That I understand. 100% that I understand. But, my Rebbe asked this week's parsha talking about Elul. One of the things he talked about by repentance. Right? What's the question by repentance? So he says that, what are people going to say? People are going to say, why do I have to work so hard in the month of Elul? Prepare for Rosh Hashanah. The reality is, after Elul and the 10 days of repentance, I went through Rosh Hashanah. I went through Yom Kippur. I went back to being the same person I was. So what's the benefit? What's the benefit of being introspective? What's the benefit of working hard? What's the benefit of doing all this? Because I know in the end I'm not going to be able to keep it. Even what I take on, I'm not going to be able to do. So my Rebbe answers, this is the claim of the evil inclination. This is the claim. You can't do it, and it's too hard, and your obligation is to change 100%, so to speak. So my Rebbe says, doesn't matter. Forget about the evil inclination. He says, you got to use the time, these 30 days being introspective, and non-Jews should also, because they also have to go through Rosh Hashanah. They're also going to get judged. Right? Doesn't matter what happened last year and the year before. Right? He's saying, well, I became the same thing. He said, so Rebbe here says, if not for the month of Elul, you got Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, then where are you going to get fear of heaven from for the rest of the year? That's where you get it from. That's where you get all the inspiration from. It's going to synagogue for all those hours. Right? And thinking about what you need to do. So Rebbe says, even if you're not going to merit to change, and you stay the same year to year, at the very least, what does the month do? It should wake us up. It should wake us up spiritually. So he says we should try and accomplish whatever we can do. Whatever we can do. Right? But a person has to remember, though, if you live in the past, you have no future. You can't just say, well, the past, I can't change it, there's no point. and that's it. You got to forget about the past. Forget about what happened last year. You might tell me this year going to be no different. Maybe. But I still have to put my best foot forward. And it's an auspicious time. Tremendously auspicious time. Right over here, so I'm going to work on fear of heaven. Right? That Rashi says, book of Exodus chapter 33, verse 18. On the verse that Moshe says, God, I want to see your honor. I want to see your glory. Right? So Rashi says, what did Moshe want to see? He saw there was an auspicious time, and his words are going to be accepted. He wanted to see God's glory. He wanted to see all his glory. So when a person has an auspicious time, you don't waste it. Forget about what's going to be tomorrow, the next day, a week later. You don't want to waste it. You got to save the time. That's what you got to do. Right? Even if we're going to stay the same level, imagine. Moshe Rabbeinu said, God, let me see your glory. And what if he stayed at the same level even after seeing that? God wasted time, right? It's an auspicious time. So what? Who cares what's going to be in 2 weeks or in a month? Or 6 months from now? What does it matter? Doesn't matter over here. Because you're going to tell me, well, I'm going to be the same person I was before. First of all, you don't know that to be true. But even so, take whatever you can. You take whatever you can from the month of Elul, Rosh Hashanah, you take the spiritual time. You take it and you run with it. Now, what's the $1.5 million question? What is somebody going to say? Someone's going to say, because here we're talking mostly non-Jews, you're going to say that doesn't apply to me. Month of Elul applies. Because they're also going to get judged. 100% they're going to get judged. So why don't they have to be introspective? Doesn't matter. They don't have to go through Rosh Hashanah like we do. Fine. They shouldn't try and get inspired to be the best non-Jews they can be. Right? Why? Why not? What's the problem? Right? What's the problem over here? They also have an obligation. They're going to go through Rosh Hashanah. They're going to get judged. They don't know that. Most of the non-Jews don't know that. So shouldn't they prepare? They also have a court case in 30 days. Clock starts ticking now. 30 days. We can change a lot in 30 days. You're going to work. It's a lifetime of work, but, ethics affects us. Musar affects us. Can't just read it like a newspaper. It affects us. We have to think. We have to make a plan. We have to work hard. Even if we put stumbling blocks in front of ourselves or others do. We got to work hard either way. That doesn't matter. But you got to start somewhere. Right? Can't focus on everything. You won't be able to do it. 100%. You got to focus on small things and then be able to do the small things. Put them into action. If you don't bite off more than you can chew. Because if I were to tell you one thing you got to do, and this is going to change your life forever, is you just stop tuning into the CFL. Right? Stop it cold turkey. That's not going to happen. Totally not going to happen. Now if you tell me down the line, good. So if you tell me down the line, the only thing I do is watch a little bit of highlights, that's already a level. That's already something. You're not sitting there watching the game from beginning to end. That's already something. It's not all or nothing over here. God wants you to see you taking steps. Doesn't matter if they're big. They might look very small, baby steps. Okay? God wants to see you taking steps somewhere. You're doing something. Because you could be asleep the whole month of Elul, through Rosh Hashanah, through Yom Kippur, and that's it. Totally asleep. Doesn't mean we reach the levels we want. Doesn't mean that. You got to start somewhere. You got to do something. You got to do something where whatever it is, it's relatively small, and I can do it on a regular basis. And then once you master that, you do something else. While continuing mastering that. But take something, then cut it in half, then cut it in a quarter. Make something you can actually do on a regular basis. Because if you can't, then you feel like a failure. You absolutely feel like a failure. So a person would, I've gotten this question a lot. People say, well, what do I work on? I got so many things to work on. They say, work on everything. Ha ha. Gonna work on everything, forget it. Right? Make a list. Make a list of things you want to work on. It could be a long list, but, take things in sound bites. Make it realistic. Make it realistic. Things that you can actually do. Because if you don't do that, what's evil inclination going to do? Evil inclination going to destroy you. Evil inclination is going to say, guess what? You can't do it. You never could do it. And that's it. Finished. You won't be able to do it. An evil inclination will break you. And you're going to say, so what's the point? Right? And that was the question my Rebbe asked. What's the point of working hard in Elul and Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur and all that if I'm going to be the same person later? And I'm not going to change. That is the way of the evil inclination. So you got to take the evil inclination and hit it upside the head and say, no, doesn't matter. I'm going to work hard anyway. I'm going to try. I'm going to make the effort. I'm going to make a real effort. It's not a New Year's resolution. I'm making a real effort. I have a plan. How I'm going to do this. So the question is, okay, you might fail. You might have other issues, different things. Okay, but make a real plan. Make checks and balances. A person wants to work on something. Let them give themselves a fine every time. Every time you speak Lashon Hara, you put a certain amount of money goes to charity. Every time you curse, a certain amount of money goes to charity. You can say, what if I don't have the money? Still a good thing to do. Give yourself some sort of fine. Then you realize that, I have repercussions if I don't do it. It could be a monetary fine. It could be, other types of fine, whatever it is. Whatever it is. But you got to make it real. It's got to be realistic. It can't be something I can't do. Now, we may say, I want to go to such a high level. You can't jump through hoops. You can't climb the ladder too high. You're going to fall. You have to do things that make sense. That are easy to do. Easy schmeezy. And then cut it in half. Cut it into a quarter. Because then you feel accomplishment. I'll give an example. Person wants to work on not speaking Lashon Hara. Right? So figure out a time during the day. Whatever it is, that time during the day for half an hour. Whatever happens, I'm not going to say anything bad against someone else, think bad thoughts against them, whatever it is, just for half an hour, 20 minutes, but a certain time of the day. Right? Over time, you might want to increase that, but even if you don't, doesn't that give you a higher awareness? Same thing about cursing. Everybody curses to a certain extent. Even in the secular world, nobody really cares. The person curses, whatever. F-bombs all over the place. Right? So, yeah, people curse. So what do? You work on it. You work on it. For an hour a day, this time, whatever happens, I'm not going to curse. Now think about what can happen during that time. All these terrible things can happen at once. Okay, but you're specifically working on a specific time. After a while, you're going to have a higher awareness. It doesn't have to take months. It can take days. Then when you hear someone curse, it's like, oh, I can't believe someone's, the person's like scum. I can't believe someone talks like that. Were you any different 2 days before, a week before? No, but now you have a higher awareness. Once you have a higher awareness, different world. It's a different world because you're not the same person. Doesn't mean 100% you'll never curse. I mean, hopefully you won't. But when you have a higher awareness, you think differently. You talk differently. That's already worth something. They can say, but I'm going to be the same person. Not necessarily. Again, does that mean 100% you're never going to curse again? Doesn't mean that. What it means is you have the potential to do it, okay? Not saying it's right. You may end up doing it anyway, okay? But you haven't, now you feel worse. Now you feel worse. Why? Because you know it's bad. But you don't want the evil inclination to come and destroy you at the same time. You chalk it up and say, okay, made a mistake, shouldn't have done it, this, that, and the other thing. Right? So, as we did at the beginning of all these classes, energize the Bonnie would say, you got to run with it. When you're awake, hopefully, a person's wide awake, it's all about changing my thoughts, changing my mentality. That's what it's all about. Some it takes longer, some takes shorter, but you have a higher awareness. Having that higher awareness, most people today, my daughter and son-in-law were telling me, people are brain dead. They are brain dead. Most important question they may ever ask, ketchup or mustard or even relish on my hot dog. They're holding nowhere in the world. Conversations go nowhere. Talk about nothing. A lot of it about food. Waste. What a waste. Don't talk about real issues. Torah, Hashkafa, Jewish philosophy, different things. They're not holding anywhere in the world. So we should be whistling Dixie. Anybody listening, I don't know how to whistle Dixie or do the moonwalk, right? But we should kiss the ground every second and say, thank God, I'm out of Christianity. I'm not a pagan. I'm able to keep Torah mitzvahs, whatever I'm supposed to do. But you got to keep that lit, that fire lit. And what's the problem? What's the problem? Someone here says, keep that enthusiasm yearning alive. You're right. What's the problem? We get beaten down in life. We got beaten down in life. And that's hard. That is very hard. But, I was just reading something earlier that someone was saying that, even when life is hard, how do you get the joy? How do you get the simcha? To true joy. You know how you do that? So you're saying that think about positive things. Think about positive. Think about the fact you're not in a hospital and, you're sitting flat in your back and you can't move and you're in pain. The Vilna Gaon, I'll just end with this. More than 250 years ago, of Elijah Vilna, his students were suffering from severe poverty. Severe poverty. And every Friday, they would go to the hospital. And they would see people who couldn't feed themselves, couldn't walk, were in a lot of pain. Now, they came home to their homes. They didn't have very much. But guess what? They could go like this, no pain. They can move their arms, their legs, this, that, no pain. Oh, you want all the physical comforts? Oh, that's a different issue. But they were suffering so much from that. So why the Vilna Gaon do that? Get them to appreciate life. Get them to appreciate what they have. Show gratitude to God what they have, not just think about the suffering. So this person was saying, how do you get to joy even when life is hard? Think about positive things. Think about things you're grateful for. So what's the one problem? One problem is, when a person's down, what's going to happen? You're going to rip up this list before you have a chance to look at it. When you're going out of your mind. But you can't do that. You have to have the gratitude. You absolutely have to have the gratitude. There's so many things. Health is one of them. One little thing goes wrong in the body, that's it. The whole body hurts. It's not just that, that one organ hurts. No, the whole body is aching. Right?
Rabbi, I got to wrap this up because I got another class shortly.
Okay, so that is food for thought. I was just going to say that ends Mishnah 12, right? That pretty much ends that Mishnah. We'll start Mishnah 13 next week, same time.
All right, same time at the earlier time, yeah?
Yeah.
Excellent. Well, Rabbi, thank you so much. 2 o'clock
Eastern time, 9 o'clock Israel time.
And I hope we didn't divert you at all. I mean, I think you covered some great ground. And I really enjoyed your last Tanakh talk there where you were talking about the conversions. And I found it odd that William brought up the point about how many people think it should be for free. And
well, we did a Tanakh talk on that about the fact, that's what I hit in the last 10 minutes, 15 minutes, about why, I spoke about that in a whole program. We did a whole video on that. But yeah, it's cognitive dissonance, as we mentioned. It is pretty incredulous.
Yeah, it's amazing that people think they should, things that they should benefit or want to benefit from has to be at someone else's expense.
But for anything else, a person would never ask that. You never haggle with your plumber unless you're Jewish, right? You're never going to haggle on these.
Scottish,
you're not going to haggle on these things. when it comes to education, whatever. But they think because the church gives everything for free, right? Or what's the argument? We're going to get to Pirkei Avos in, I don't know, probably another 10 years when it says that Moshe Rabbeinu taught for free and that Torah should be for free, right? But the only thing is, Moshe Rabbeinu was made rich by God himself through the tablets. God made him rich. So, it's a different issue. But yeah, it is cognitive dissonance, and a person, you can't charge an arm and a leg either, even though I think this is worth, it should get paid just like a lawyer or anything else, but people aren't going to do it, in general. But, you're paying for someone.
What value are they assigning when they make such statements? Yeah.
Right. I mean, come on. Someone who's an expert in, in computer graphics, you're going to pay them like a street sweeper. Come on. It's value.
The better ones are paid immense. I mean, why do you think these Hollywood movies have hundreds of millions of dollars of budgets?
You're getting value, but you're going to say, but it's spiritual, right? Well, you can't put a price tag on that. And I can tell you, just based on my own thing, just one other thing, and that is, the help, the guidance, and everything else. Even if a person doesn't pay out of pocket, it's worth millions. It's worth millions. Someone's got an expert and can help you and take you from A to B. That's a huge thing. Huge. Right? That you can't put a price tag on.
Yeah. The answers over the difficulties of life is you can't, it's priceless for sure. Anyway, so I think we're going to sign out for now, and we will be back next week at the same earlier time.
It's going to be for a while, till next summer. So we got it's going to be the same time.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much, Rabbi, and we hope you have a blessed week with all that you got going on there in Israel. And just know we appreciate you and are thankful for the study that you have done. And you can see the transmission of Torah, and we're grateful when you do share it with us. And
don't worry about it. I'm just a YouTube rabbi. It's fine.
Your letters have weight, so for sure. All right, folks. So we're signing out. Blessings. We'll be back in about 25 minutes with Rabbi Poston and the Tomer Devorah continuation. Beautiful, beautiful series. So if you want to stick around for that, you're more than welcome. I've got to reset it up. So we're going to sign up for now. Have a wonderful, wonderful day, everybody.